Everybody can see my slides, I'm assuming. Let's kick off. See, that's the challenge I'm going to have now, is letting people in as well as speaking. But there we go. Let's start. So yeah, hi everybody. As you start coming into the chat, lovely to see you all. Welcome to the Welsh Azure User Group virtual meetup on this 18th of October 2023. The usual format again this month. Thank you all for joining. Just before we get into what we're going to be up to this month, again, quick hello from the Welsh Azure User Group team. It's only myself on the call today. I know Matt is travelling back from London. I think he's been at Envision this today, so he's on his way back on the train. So I just said, look, mate, don't rush to get back on now. Just I'll get tonight's session sorted out. So usual thing, if you've got, it's a community user group at the end of the day. So if you've got any suggestions, likes, dislikes, if you want to speak at the user group, please do feel free to reach out to any of us. Add us on Twitter, on LinkedIn. Come say hello. Like I say, we're always in the need of speakers, and like I say, as it's a community user group, we're really trying to foster that. You know, if you're a new speaker, you're looking to get into the world of public speaking, you know, user groups like us are dotted around the UK as a minimum, as well as globally as well, of course. And we're always open to getting newbies on as well, to kind of give you the opportunity to come and speak and say hello in the tech community, because I think we're a relatively friendly bunch and we don't bite, and it's all good stuff. So onwards for this month's session, as usual. Another great couple of speakers are coming to join us and give us their time to kind of come and teach us about something in particular. So we'll be kicking off fairly soon with Sam. So Sam is coming on, really talk us through information extraction, automated information extraction, using the newly fandangled, rebranded Azure AI Document Intelligence, aka Forms Recognizer, right? So if you've seen that applied AI component within Azure, I've certainly seen some great things with some customers over the last kind of a couple of years with that particular feature. So I'm really interested to see what Sam's going to show us on that. So yeah, stick around for that. We'll be kicking off fairly soon. And then we have Mr. Mashford joining us from NetApp, really to talk about NetApp Files in Azure, looking at the feature updates, because Anthony joined us probably about 18 months ago now, I think, to talk around Azure NetApp Files. So we thought it'd be a good idea just to come on, give a bit of a feature update. Where are we? Again, you know, kind of look at the scenario with how you can kind of deploy that. And I think Anthony's got some goodness to go through in his session, which will be the second session tonight. Timing wise, like I say, I'll stop rambling on fairly soon. So we'll probably kick off with Sam a little bit before 6:45, and then Anthony should be joining us around about 7:30. And as always, we'll have a quiz at the end, so stick around for that, with the famous Quizar platform. So feel free, everybody on the call, feel free to join in that, and we'll give away some prizes there, normally some Amazon vouchers. So that's your timing wise. Quick few housekeeping rules as we would normally go through. This is a community user group. Please, should go without saying, I'm sure it does anyway, please be courteous to each other. There are no silly questions. This is all about learning and a chance to air those silly questions. So the speakers, in fact, will be grateful for any question, any silly question. Drop it in the chat. Like I say, please do stay on mute unless you're invited to come off. You've got control of your own mute and camera buttons. Please use them wisely and don't interrupt where you can help it. But stay on mute unless you're invited to come off. Please do use that chat window. Should be open for people to use to drop any questions and just be interactive. You know, bit of conversation going on in there. Let us know your challenges or where you've used the services. Anything really that we can hook a little bit of networking into would be great. I normally leave a QR code at the end. If you do get a chance to leave us some feedback, that would also be really appreciated. But like I say, do stick around after Anthony's session for the quiz. Nice little bit of fun to end off the evening. Like I say, we're normally about 2 hours, and we're normally finished off by around about 8:30. But most of all, please, be interactive and enjoy the session. It's all about learning and enjoying it as we go. Before we kick off with Sam, a quick word from our sponsors. At that point, Des quickly spins around in his chair. Des and Servant have been, an avid supporter of the Welsh Azure user group, as well as many other user groups across the UK. Really, since we started back, can you believe it, Des, over 3 years ago now? So it's been that long, absolutely. So, Des, I don't know if you wanted to say a few words to the group now. Just, I know you haven't been on for a little while, so hello.
Why not? I'm here, and I'm just trying to get the dog back in his place. So
can see.
yeah, hi everyone, great to meet you. I'm Des McGuire. I'm the founder at Servant. We're an expert Azure partner. Working with the platform myself for 15 years. I was involved in Project Red Dog. Been there, done it, got the T-shirt, and set up a business based in that Azure early Azure experience that we had, and we're delighted to sponsor 3 Azure user groups. Northern one in Manchester, obviously the Welsh one here, and Glasgow Azure user group. Don't ask me which one's my favourite. It's like saying which one's your favourite child. So I'll leave that there. But yeah, obviously John, known you for a while. I'm proud to continue sponsoring the user group and really adding that value. And I do promise I'll be more visible over the coming months on the next user groups as well. So I'll pass back to you, John. Thanks everyone. Great to meet you.
No, thanks a lot, Des. And like I say, it really is appreciated. For those that aren't involved in running user groups, companies like Servant and certainly Des and the amount of support that they give, to keep the local community, in touch with each other more than anything and offering those networking opportunities, I think, sometimes probably goes unnoticed to a certain extent. So reach out, give Des, buy him a pint next time you see him. So I think he absolutely deserves it, the amount that he puts in with support in the group. So
John, I need to give you some updated slides, which I'll send over just now.
You're gonna have to, yeah, please do, Des. Drop us in, and we always say about any activities and things you guys are doing. So please do let me know when you want to come on and do some sessions as well, Des. On that note,
cool.
But no, thanks again, Des, and good to see you as always. Well, I'm sure we'll have to meet up at some point anyway, even though you're all the way up north there. We'll meet up for a drink at some point soon, I'm sure. And moving on as well, we've got another sponsor that has come into the fold. And one of the things about the Welsh Azure User Group, I think when we started, we were looking for, to kind of drum up that enthusiasm between local Welsh businesses. Now, I know a good group of people that join these sessions are, from local Welsh businesses, but equally, from afar, right across the UK and globally as well. So, it's good to see, people coming, flocking. But a big shout out to CreditSafe as well. They've kind of partnered up with Servant to kind of support us with what we do, and in return, we kind of echo what those guys are up to as well, being HQ'd down in Cardiff, local Welsh headquarter facility. There's a little bit about CreditSafe, and fundamentally it's great. They've got a good pool of they're actually a multi-cloud company themselves, and at some point we'll probably get Ridian on and a couple of the other technical guys in there, because they're doing some really interesting work at the moment. So we're just working with those guys about coming on, actually doing a talk to show what they're up to, and kind of help spread the love, as it were, on Azure. Okay, and that's probably it from me. So onwards with tonight's sessions. Sam, if you're ready, I will hand straight over to you and let you delve into Azure AI Document Intelligence. Thanks again for giving up your time, Sam.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen. And let me get this started. All right, so good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me and see my screen okay? So thank you, John, for having me, and welcome to this presentation titled Automated Information Extraction with Azure AI Document Intelligence. A little bit about me. I'm originally from Mexico. I am currently a tech lead at a consulting company called Jenica. You can find us at jenica.com. And when I'm not doing anything technology or something technology related, I love to spend time with my wife and my 2 kids, watching movies, playing video games, and anything football related, really. I'm very passionate about it. You can connect with me at in Twitter or X, I guess, at thesoccerdev. Also my GitHub repo, and would love to connect on LinkedIn as well in case that anyone has any questions about this API after the presentation, or just general networking. I love to connect, and I love to help people whenever I can. So the agenda for this presentation, we're gonna touch very briefly on the Azure AI offerings. John already mentioned some of the points that I'm going to touch on that section, but we're going to talk about cognitive services and just applied AI services. Then we're going to dive deeper into the API that we're going to talk about today, which is the Document Intelligence API. We're going to talk about the model options that you have for the information extraction. We're going to talk about input requirements, so what kind of files you can provide to this API. Also a little bit of data privacy, because some of these models deal with documents and have personal information, so that is something important to keep in mind. And then finally, we're going to look at these APIs in a demo. So not sure if anyone is familiar with the Cognitive Services APIs. These are artificial intelligence APIs that are offered by Azure, which you can connect into your applications very, very easily. There's 4 different groups that these APIs fall into. So you have speech, speech to text or text to speech, speech translation. You have language like entity recognition, conversation for your chatbots, and obviously text translation as well. Vision, where you can analyze images, you can detect faces, things like that. And then the decision group, which has anomaly detection or content moderation and things like that. There used to be a separate group of APIs called Applied Services APIs, which were designed or were created for very common business problems, so very, very specific scenarios. One of them is Document Intelligence. As John mentioned, it used to be called Form Recognizer. You have an Immersive Reader, Metrics Advisor, Video Indexer, Cognitive Search, and then finally Bot Service. And the reason why I touch base on those very briefly is because as of July of this year, they all came onto the into the umbrella of Azure AI Services. So you might still see that Cognitive Services or Applied Service references in billing or things like that. But you also might see the Form Recognizer label in certain training materials or documentation. So I just wanted to mention it briefly so that if you run into that, you just know that it's exactly the same API that we're going to talk about today. So the model options that you have to analyze your documents, we have the document analysis documents, so the read API, layout API, and then general document API. The pre-built models, which are common documents that you can expect to find pretty much across different industries, different countries, different environments, invoices, receipts, things like that. And then you also have the option of creating and training your own custom models if the general or the generic ones don't really satisfy your needs. So first, we're going to talk about the document analysis models. So the read model is the most basic of them all, and then it allows you to extract text from documents, so either print or handwritten text. It's able to detect paragraphs, text lines, words, locations, and even languages. It has a higher resolution than the Vision Read API. So the regular Vision API has an ability to extract text from images as well. But this API uses a higher resolution so that it can work better with the documents that you provide. And then it is the underlying OCR engine for the other models. So this read model, any other models that we're going to talk about in the rest of the presentation are going to be built on top of that. The development options that you have for this read model, most of the development options are going to be the same for a lot of these models. There's a couple exceptions. But you have the option of Document Intelligence Studio, which we're going to look at during our demo. You can call it just as an old school, regular REST API. There's a C# SDK, a Python SDK, a Java SDK, and a JavaScript or a JavaScript SDK as well for some of these APIs. Now, when you're calling this APIs, you need to provide a model ID that specifies which model you're trying to reach or which model you're trying to use. So for example, for this read API, the model ID that you need to pass as a parameter is a pre-built -read, and we're going to look at that in a demo as well. So the layout model is the next one on this group. this one extracts, as the name implies, text and layout to return structured data representations. So there's a couple different roles that your text can have in a document. So what is called geometric roles is text, tables, selection marks, and then logical roles, headings, footers, things like that are example of logical roles. This API combines the OCR capabilities with deep learning models in order to analyze that document and be able to tell, okay, this is a title, this is a heading, this is a footer, and things like that. So this is an example of some of those elements that the API would be able to extract. So page header, title, footer, et cetera, et cetera. Again, the development options are pretty much the same as the previous API. And again, the model ID is just going to be a little different so that you can specify that you actually want to get the layout apart from the text. The general document model, it extracts, so we can think about these as going a level higher. So you can do text layout, but also key value pairs from the documents. Obviously, it is a pre-trained model that supports structured, semi-structured, and unstructured documents. So you can pass different types of documents into this API, and when you call it, it will try its best to detect all the text, layout, and all the different fields that you have. If it's a form, for example, it's going to detect those fields and the values that are populated as key value pairs. So speaking of key value pairs, so for structured documents, it's going to be the label and the value for a field. So again, if you pass some sort of form that has very defined, very clearly defined fields, it's going to be the name of the field and the value that it has. And then for unstructured documents, the key value pairs that come back is going to be based on the context of the paragraph. So as an example, the date of a contract. So if it sees that there's a date somewhere in there, it's in a position that looks like a date of a contract, then it's going to identify it as a key value pair. Again, development options for the general document model are pretty much the same as the other APIs, and it has its own model ID. I'm going to make a quick pause here in case that anyone has any questions about the models that we talked so far, and if not, we're going to continue into pre-built models. All right, so pre-built models. These are, like I said, this is our models that allow you to process documents that are common format. So for example, invoices, you can extract customer and vendor details, receipts, so sales, transaction details, anything that you can expect to find in a receipt, identity, so passports, IDs, license, driving licenses, thank you. Insurance cards, you can also, you have models for W-2s, which are specific tax documents, business cards, contracts, and very specific US tax forms that are available as specific models as well. So those are the last two models that you have available there. Again, the development options are very similar to the previous one. The exception is the receipt API, which as the last time I checked, it doesn't have a Java or JavaScript SDK. And then all of these models have their own model IDs that you need to pass as a parameter to the API so that it knows that you're trying to execute some of these models. All right, so over to custom models. So if you find yourself in the situation where none of the models that we just talked about work, then you have the ability and the option to create your own model. So you can provide the API with samples of your documents. You can do as little as 5 documents for your training. You obviously will have to label the fields that you want to be able to identify, and then you create your model, and then you start calling it as if you were calling any other models with just a specific model ID. There are two main groups for these models. So you have the extraction models and the classification models. Under the extraction models, you have the custom template. So this is if your documents, you're only dealing with one format that's very static, that doesn't change much, if at all, then you want to go with a custom template. That'll be the easiest way for you to do that. So it can identify form fields, selection marks, tables, signatures, and selected regions. Now, if your documents are not that static, or they don't have a template that doesn't change much, then you also have the option to do a custom neural model. So extracts data from mixed type documents, and again, you can provide different structured, semi-structured, and unstructured documents for it to extract the information out of them. You also have the custom composed, which you can just group a collection of models. If you have multiple custom models, you can just group them into one, one API, and that's what it's called, a custom composed, if that's something that you need. Now, the other main group in the custom models is the classification model. So if you, for example, you're trying to process invoices and receipts, for example, that have a very specific template, and you have to create a custom model for those, you can also put a classification model on top so that you can determine whether it is an invoice or a receipt, and you can route it to the appropriate custom model that is going to extract information or it's going to provide you a better result based on the type of document that you have or that you provide. So those are the options that you have on your the custom models. So input requirements. So the file formats that you can provide, the read API is the one, as you can see from this table, and obviously this is, as of right now, the one that has the most flexibility as far as formats go. The read API is the only one that allows you to provide Microsoft Office documents. Everything else you can do either PDFs, or you can provide images of the documents, and they'll be able to use that as an input. Now, there are certain restrictions on what type of files or sizes that you can provide for these files. So for PDF and TIFF files, you can do up to 2,000 pages, only do for a free tier. Obviously, you don't want to be able, or Microsoft doesn't want you to be able to process your entire stack of documents on the free tier. The file size is less than 500 megabytes, so only 4 megabytes for the free tier. And then obviously you don't want to provide an image that it's either too small or too big, because then the API is not going to do a good job about extracting the information. Apart from that, a little bit obvious, but PDFs can be password protected. That's as intelligent as the APIs are. They're not going to be able to guess whatever password you have on those PDFs. And then the minimum size of the text is an 8-point text at 150 DPI. Now we touch base, especially in the pre-built models. We have some models that deal with personal data, like the ID model, which if you're processing passports, if you're processing driver's licenses, if you're processing insurance information, that is sensitive data that you want to make sure that it is protected. So obviously there's authentication. You need a key in order to be able to use the API. Obviously, no one else would be able to call that particular model or access your data unless they have that key. The data is also secured in transit. The input data that you provide is encrypted. And some of that data is stored temporarily, but again, it's kept separate, and you don't have the risk of running into someone else's data, since it's separated based on the subscription and then the API credentials. The output for the custom trained models and the models themselves are stored temporarily as well. And then the input data and results are deleted within 24 hours if there's you don't use them at all. and they're not used for other purposes. So they're not going to use that data that you provide in order to train some of these models, if that is a concern. And then finally, if your data governance or your security requirements do not allow you to run these APIs, or you need to run these APIs on a certain network, you can also download those into containers and run them in your customer's network or in your network if you need them to keep it isolated. Now, that process does take a little bit longer. You do have to file a form and ask Microsoft for permission to download those models so that you can run them in containers. But again, if those are requirements for your particular project or the particular client that you're working with, you do have that option. So that's what I have for the the theory part of this. I want to stop here before we move on to the demo in case that anyone has any questions about anything that we've talked so far. And if not, I will continue over to the demo. All right. So we've all done demos in the past, and we know how the demo gods don't always cooperate. So I'm gonna throw this little prayer out there. Let this code compile in not an hour, but a little while. Allow this application to run with speed and zest, as this will keep users glued to my test. If my code blows up in my face, do it with silent grace. And last but not least, when all is said and run, let thy requirements have been correctly done. With that, let me switch over here. So I want to start with Document Intelligence Studio because I really like this tool, and it is a great way for you to get started with this API without having to write a single line of code. So if you're just exploring what the API can do, if you're exploring if this particular API is going to work for your scenario, if you're trying to decide between the general document, for example, or a custom model, this is the place where you want to start. Again, you can see there's still some references to Form Recognizer up here. I'm sure that will be renamed eventually at one point, but you do have the option to test all of these APIs, take them for a spin and then see what you can do. You can also create your custom models from here, which we're going to look at that in a little bit. So let's look at the general document. You click on try it out. You obviously need to have an Azure resource created in order to be able to run this. But there are some sample documents that are provided for you already in case that you don't have something. If you just want to take it for a spin and see what it does, you can see here this is an application for a permit. It is a form that has fields that are well defined. And then if you click on the Analyze option, so here is where you can see some of the other things that it can do. So you can specify certain pages. If you upload multiple documents, you can specify whether you want to do just the current one or all the documents. You can tell it to extract information out of barcodes if that's something that you have in your documents. And you have the option to identify the language of the document if that is something that you need to do as well. You do obviously have to turn it on. This capabilities in the bottom, as you can see, they're extra charged, so very careful as you're testing this. If you turn some of these on, there's going to be an extra charge for those. So if we click Save, we click on Run Analysis, and over here on the right-hand side, you will see the results are going to populate. This is going to the fields and the content tabs are going to show it in a user-friendly way. So you can see here. It has the name of the field, so it corresponds to this right here. It was able to pull up the value from there, and then it gives you, as it happens with a lot of machine learning or machine learning APIs, it gives you a confidence score of how confident it is that it pulled the right text or the right information, so that you can then add some logic to your processing. If you see the confidence is not high enough, then you might want to pass the particular document for analysis to a human or things like that. But like I said, you scroll down and you can see all the fields that it was able to identify. So it's able to tell that this was selected, but the other options were unselected. This is how it returns that particular value so that you can, again, process that if that is something that you need. And then if you go to content, then it tells you that that layout that we talked about. So it identified a few different paragraphs. So if we scroll up over here, so it identified this as a paragraph, these three. You have the selection marks that was able to identify them as well, and then identified some of these as tables just because of the format that it has. So again, depending on what kind of processing you want to do, you would get that all this information out, and you can pull that and do whatever processing you want. If you go to the result tab, then it will show you the JSON result for that particular call. So if you want to take a look at it, see what kind of information is available, as you can see, it returns the polygon information so that you can see where the text is located as well, apart from the content, with the confidence that we've seen already. So this is just the information that you see in the other tabs, but just displayed in a JSON format. And then if you click on the last tab, as the name suggests, you have some sample code that you can just download, and it's pretty much ready to go. You only have to provide your credentials, and you can execute this, and it will give you some results you can start looking at. Again, pretty much copy paste, and you put it in a console application or something small that you want to run. You will be able to run this API right away. You have the option of Python, JavaScript, and C#. And like I said, very simple code that you can just run immediately for a very simple analysis of a document that you provide. So let's backtrack. So let's do one of the pre-built ones so that you can see. And again, apart from the sample files that they provide in here, you can browse for your own files. So this is the receipt. Let me pull it up. So this is the receipt that I have. So click on run analysis real quick. Let's give it a minute. And again, the results are going to present in the same way. So you see here at the top, it's the items table. So if I click on that, it shows all the information or all the items that it was able to identify from that particular receipt, plus any information that it was able to identify. Now, one call out is you will see that it pulled the description, the price, and then this total price, but there's no quantity that it pulled. So there's no quantity in here. But as you can see, there's this custom discount 6-pack line that it wasn't able to identify because it's not something that you would find in a lot of receipts. So if this is something that you wanted to be able to pull, that might be an example of a scenario where you might actually have to go and create your custom model so that you can pull this information as well. But it's able to identify the tax details. So clicking here, you will see that it identified that sales tax and then the amount. And you can see that this was a little crumpled and it was still able to read that information pretty well. Tip, identify the merchant name, the total for that particular transaction, the address of the merchant, total tax, transaction date, subtotal. So again, fields that are common in receipts, you're going to be able to identify. Something that is a little bit more custom, you're going to have to go a different route instead of this pre-built. Again, as with the other tabs or the previous one, you can see the result in JSON format and then the code that you have, which is pretty much the same as the previous one. The only difference is, you have the merchant name, you have the fields that are defined instead of the general documents, but there's no fields defined. So you just have to access the data based on indexes for tables and things like that, which we will see a little bit of code in a second. We're gonna do a business card real quick as well, so you can see that. So zoom in a little bit, you can see what it looks like. Click on Run Analysis. So contact names, it identified this first name, last name, email addresses, websites, and then work phones. Wasn't able to identify the LinkedIn section of it. Again, if that is something that you actually want to be able to identify, you might have to use a different model, but pretty good result overall. So another quick example. So this is an older version. So again, I identify the first name and last name, emails, website, and then the work phones that are included in the in that particular image. So all the other models are available here. Again, if you want to try to run that. Any questions up to this point? All right. Then I will move on to the custom models. So as you can see here, there's the two main groups that we talked about during the presentation. So the extraction model and then the classification model. So if you click on Create New, you have some videos that will walk you through the process. So I already have one here because I've been playing around with this API because I coach my older kids football team, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of or communicate with the parents and take care of snack signups, who's bringing in snacks particular week and whatnot. So I use this API to kind of figure out if I could automate the snack signups, or I could process that snack signup form that I have and see what the API could do for that. So if I click here, this is the same way that you would create your custom model. So again, I only gave it 5 samples of documents. And what you do is you upload all those files, and then you label the information in that particular form. So this format, it has a table that has a date, a parent name with the child name, the phone number, and then whether they would like a reminder the week of the game to make sure that they bring it to the game. So the way that you train the model is pretty simple or pretty user friendly. So in here in the interface, you can, it's as simple as you click on here. So I'm gonna undo this one. So it is able to identify, it highlights any sort of information that it was able to identify. You can click on it, and then you can say, okay, this particular field, it goes under the date, and you can do that for all the other fields. So the phone number, and then the reminder column as well. Now these fields, you have absolute control of what you want to do with it. So you can see here, if I click on rename, I can rename that particular row, and the names that you give it here are the names that you're going to be able to see when you get the results from the API call. So we'll see in a little bit in the code that the way that I pulled information from this is I can just, like in a dictionary, I want the date field, and it will give me the actual value of the date. So again, starting from five documents, you do your labeling, and then you click on train. It runs a little bit of training, and then it creates a model that you can name. So this model ID, if you remember from the presentation, that is a parameter that you need to pass to the API to tell it what sort of model you're using. So when you create your custom model, you create your own model ID that you can pass as a parameter. So you see here is a snack sign-off model, and then it tells you what's the accuracy as the last training run for that particular model. And then you can do things like testing, and then you can change some of the settings that you have in here as well. So very, very handy, very easy to train and to label your data if this is the route that you want to go. Obviously, it might be more labor intensive if you are going to provide a ton of different documents, or if you have to provide a ton of different documents. But again, since this is a very static format or a very static template, I'm just doing a very simple training for this one. And obviously, since it's something that I'm just testing with it. So any questions before we move on to the code? All right. So I'm going to start with this one. So since I was just playing with the APIs, one of the examples that we're going to look at, it's using the general document API, and then the other one is using that custom model that we just walked through. So the general document is processing a document that looks kind of like this. So it has a table at the top, and then a table at the bottom with a bunch of information for the those particular players. So the way that you call the API, again, very simple, as it is the case with a lot of these APIs that Microsoft provides. You only need the endpoint API, which this is going to be common for a lot of those. Your key, which you will get obviously when you create your Azure resource. And then in this case, I'm using the SDK for Document Intelligence, which comes as you can download as a NuGet package. So you just add that NuGet package to your project, and then you have access to all the objects that you're going to see here. So you have the endpoint, you have the key, you create your credential, and you create then your client for that particular API with those credentials. Again, this is the sample. I use the sample code that I downloaded from Document Studio. So this is not used. I'm using another document, and then you can just call the analyze document operation, and then it returns the result of that analysis, and then you can go through the key value pairs. You can go through the pages if that's what you want to do. So you can get that bounding polygon information. You can do the pages, how many, the number of pages that you have on the document, the selection marks. So you can extract all that different information depending on what you want to do. You can do styles as well. You can see if it is a handwritten text or if it's printed text, and then you can go through the tables. Now, as I said before, if you're using the general document API, it's going to be a little bit more intricate to get the information out of it, because you don't have the ability to, or you're not extracting those named values or named fields out of it. So you can go through all the different tables, but then you have to do a little bit of logic to go through each cell and each row and each column and extract the data out of it. But this is kind of what you could see from the output. So for example, for that table at the top, you will see that it was able to identify the column headers and the content inside those column headers. And then it's able to identify that the rest of the rows on the table, they're just of type content, and this is the content that you have. So number one, the coach, and then the information for that particular row. So again, a little bit more cumbersome to get through that information. And if you compare that to a custom model, it's obviously going to be a little bit easier when you go through the custom API. So the first section of the code is exactly the same. Obviously, as we discussed before, the model ID has to match whatever model you're trying to call. In this case, is that snack signups that I created, and then you can go and do the processing a little bit more easier. So you can call, again, this is the date. I'm writing it to the console, but I'm also creating objects with those values. So all we have to do is just call that, use the same value that we gave to the field, and then we're able to extract the information out of that. So very easy to pull the information from those documents. Now there is the caveat that if you're dealing with handwritten form, so this is the information that it will pull up. So one of the caveats, obviously, if you're reading with or dealing with handwritten information, is that some of the information that it's going to pull is not going to be 100% accurate. So here, for example, it detected supposedly that it was a number 4. So that's where when you want to check the confidence score of that particular field. Here, it wasn't able to detect any text. So that is another issue that it is dealing with when it's dealing with handwritten information. But if you were dealing with printed and you were creating when you're creating a custom model, obviously it's going to be a lot easier to access that information, and the accuracy is going to increase. So I think I saw a question. So it says, does any of the document data leave your Azure tenant, or is all of the processing done within the model? So it doesn't, it as far as I know, and based on what I saw in the presentation, it doesn't get passed to any OpenAI or anything like that. So everything is kept confined to within your temporary storage for your particular API calls. Now I don't know if that's going to change at some point, but as of right now, that's the state of the APIs. Any other questions? All right, so the last thing that I want to touch base real quick, because it's obviously something that it is something to consider when it comes to choosing which model or figuring out if this API is something that you can use in your projects, are the costs for using it. So you can do the pay as you go for like you do with other Azure resources. You have the free tier, which obviously is limited to what you can do with it. But then the cost depends on the model that you choose. So you can see the custom extraction is obviously going to be a lot more than the read API, for example. So something to keep in mind as well as you're trying to make a decision on which API to use. There is also commitment tiers for these APIs. So if you know in advance that you have a high volume of documents that you need to process, and you know approximately the amount that you're going to process, then you can go with the commitment tiers, which are going to be a lot cheaper than going with the pay as you go model. That is it for me. So if you do not have any questions, I do have the links to the documentation for this. Whoops, hang on one second. Let me go back to that, and then if you want to download the presentation, that's a barcode that will give you access to that, so you can access those links as well to the documentation. And I'll leave it for a couple seconds in case anyone wants to take a picture. And then again, for anyone that was not here for the beginning of the presentation, You can reach out to me in those either Twitter or LinkedIn. I haven't put my Blue Sky information there, but I just got that one as well. Again, happy to connect, network, or answer any questions that you might have about these APIs. That's it for me.
Thank you very much, Sam. Awesome. Thank you for that. That was a great presentation. Yeah, I mean, it's really, really interesting to see, isn't it, the way that things like Forms Recognizer is going now. I mean, I've seen some great examples, customers starting to use that kind of classification to run down specific different model types, and they start to integrate with certainly OpenAI, with kind of GPT-3 or 4 models to kind of help with the classification as well from the OCR. Some clever things going on. So
yeah,
a
lot of exciting things going on.
There are, and I guess it's just that, kind of, I like the way, Microsoft have kind of put that little playground in there as well, and the ability to kind of, test your own kind of documents before, and try and understand it more than anything before you jump in. But no, it's a great overview. Really enjoyed that. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, one thing now that you mentioned about that little playground, that is actually available for some of the other APIs. So the language, speech, vision, there's also available in case anyone wants to look at those or has a need to look at those APIs and take them for a spin. There's those Language Studio, Vision Studio. If you want to look them up or Google them, those are available as well.
Yeah, it's a good shout. No, absolutely. I think on a lot of the cognitive services, they are there, aren't they? But yeah, it's always just good fun, just having a little play and just seeing what you can do with it anyway before you try and work out your use case for it. But no, Sam, thank you very much. Really appreciate you giving up your time. So I mean, yeah, if everybody wants to show their appreciation for Sam, come off mute or use the react button. That would be great. But yeah, we'll keep in touch, and feel free to stick around to the end, Sam, and join in the quiz and all that good stuff as well. But really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot there, Sam. That was great.
Thanks for having me.
See you soon, no doubt. But thank you for now, and yeah, have a good rest of the day. I know, yeah, you're not quite as late as us over here in the UK, so got some work to get back to, no doubt, at some point as well. But right, we'll move swiftly on then. So yeah, thank you, Sam. As always, give it up time to come and teach us something new, and yeah, it certainly was a great talk from my perspective. So on that note, Mr. Anthony Mashford, if you are there, I'm going to hand directly over to you, and we are going to have some updates on Azure NetApp Files, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Hi, John. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Sam. Great talk, by the way, mate. I did have a question, which just wanted to pose quickly. Was it's interesting actually with the uptake of AI and everything else. How much traction are you seeing? How prepared, or let's say trusting, are customers or clients to actually adopt AI?
I think that's just relatively new to a lot of them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of questions, and we actually have a client that we just started, and we're probably going to use Document Intelligence for their use case. But there's definitely a lot of customers that have heard the AI buzzword, but they don't really know what that means and what they have to do to get ready to use some of these tools, or just add machine learning. They don't know that they need clean data, for example, to be able to use some of these tools. So, but it's definitely, it's everywhere in the news. So we've seen a lot of more projects coming to us with people saying, "Hey, can we use machine learning or AI to do this and do that?" So, yeah, a lot of uptake on that.
Well, that's great to hear. It's stuff is just some of it's mind-boggling. So, great. Thank you for the presentation. Really enjoyed that. Good evening, everybody. Hi, Anthony. I'm here to talk to you this evening about Azure NetApp Files. As John mentioned, I was lucky enough to meet and chat with you guys about 18 months ago, and I'm pretty sure you appreciate in cloud terms 18 months is a Jurassic period. So there's been quite a few updates and enhancements. So this is a bit of a refresh on the ANF service, what it is, and also a few updates on what's been brought to the platform by Microsoft recently. So very quick introduction to myself, that those that don't know me. Anthony Mashford. I'm a cloud solution architect working at NetApp. I'm actually very focused though on Azure, and Azure's been my background for the last 10 years, and previous to that I've worked in data centers. And actually this is it's technically my third career, because my first career was a fisherman. Believe it or not, I started my journey into work working on fishing boats back many years ago. And then I decided I got sick of getting up early in the morning and getting cold and wet. So I decided to join what was then Her Majesty's, now His Majesty's Royal Marines. And I spent 10 years bouncing around the world doing various things. And then decided to grow up. And by the way, that's just me there. If you're struggling to pick me out in the picture, I decided to grow up and get a proper job. So I started my career in technology. So, and that's where I've been for over 20 years now. So that's me. What I like to do in my time off, I have a passion for motorbikes, which I've had for nearly all of my life. So this is what I do, is a bit of fun, and that's how I relax. So that's a very just brief introduction to Anthony and who I am. The agenda I've set out for this evening is we're going to talk about some challenges, and then we're going to look at Azure NetApp Files and just an overview of the service, and then look at some of the feature updates that have been brought to the platform by Microsoft in the last 18 months. And as well, hopefully at the end we'll run a bit of demo. Sam, I really loved your prayer to the demo gods. I need to remember that one. I think I need to recite that more often, because sometimes they don't always go right, but hopefully this evening it will go well. So the challenges that businesses see when they're trying to move from on-premises into Azure, and I think, you know, the biggest ones is always cost. Cost is always a driver, even more so nowadays in the world that we're in. Everybody's got their eye on the cost. The ability to deliver test and dev environments on premises was, you know, could be challenging based on resource and everything else. However, with the way the public cloud is, you know, especially Azure, you can create resources on demand, you can spin them up, you can scale them, etc. And to ease the migration, because realistically, I think, you know, a few years ago there was this phrase "art of the possible," which I'll be honest, I wasn't a fan of. Okay, and that was basically saying, yeah, you can do all this wonderful stuff in a public cloud, but realistically, as probably most of us do know, it ends up as a migration, as a lift and shift. But to be able to lift those challenging business applications from on-premises, which are relying on high performance, low latency storage, as an example, you know, until a few years ago, Azure really was limited. And that's why Azure NetApp Files exists, because Microsoft needed to deliver high performance, low latency file storage services. And they looked around the market, and obviously NetApp being sort of the forerunner in that space, in over a 30-year lineage of delivering those services, then they partnered together and Azure NetApp Files was born. And the great thing about it is obviously the scale, you know, being able to scale. If you were on premises, you might need to go and procure more kit or licenses, etc. Then, but as we've discussed just then in Azure, you can scale on demand. You know, you can scale it up, you can scale it down, you can flex it, very simple, without having to outlay a huge amount of expenditure. And the ability to optimize compute and the resources to meet the demand. And this is where Azure NetApp Files really does add the value, is the performance, the scalability, and the costs. You know, with the CPU as an example, one workload which fits really well with Azure NetApp Files are the databases, either Oracle or SQL. To deploy that using Azure VM instances and managed disks, you most likely will need to deploy larger instances to leverage those larger disks to get the throughput that the storage requires. The great thing about being able to decouple the storage from the VM with Azure NetApp Files is you can deploy smaller virtual machines. And if you've got your licensing for SQL or Oracle tagged to those machines, then the smaller machines will probably mean small or less vCPU. Less vCPU could mean less licensing, ergo cheaper costs. And also the ability to flex it across the network. You know, again, one of the biggest challenges over Azure over the years was around networking. Improvements on the memory utilization, and obviously the less disk utilization because of the storage being handling all the I/O by Azure NetApp Files. All this can really help to introduce optimization around compute. So, Azure NetApp Files. It's important to point out that this is a Microsoft first-party service. Even though it has NetApp's name in it, it's a service which is delivered, supported, and built by Microsoft. You consume it as part of your Azure consumption plan. You don't need to buy any additional licensing, any tin. I think you simply procure storage on demand when you need it via the Azure portal, or indeed via a REST API, because it's a resource managed service. You can control it programmatically using, you know, ARM templates, Azure Bicep, Terraform, etc. The use cases where it fits really well, there are 5 real key use cases where Azure NetApp Files really adds value. One of the largest ones is SAP. If anybody's familiar with the SAP solutions, quite highly strung, latency sensitive, requiring high throughput. And Azure NetApp Files can deliver that. In fact, Azure NetApp Files is the only storage service on Azure certified for SAP S/4HANA databases. Another area is HPC, high performance compute, things like Cycle Cloud, where the ability to scale up, scale down quickly on demand is just super, super important. I've worked with a few customers that are doing exactly this, a few Formula One teams, a couple of universities that are using it for genomic sequencing, etc. Another one, and probably the most common, is VDI. So Azure Virtual Desktop, or indeed Citrix fronted workloads that are using the FS Logix profile management tool. And the great thing about this is it's network attached storage, which you can attach to virtual machines. Again, you can scale it up, you can scale it down. And it's extremely flexible. There are other file storage options you could consider for within Azure, for instance, Azure Files. However, there are some limitations with the Azure Files service regarding this scalability. For instance, you can only get 100,000 IOPS from a single file share. With Azure NetApp Files, the service can scale up to 400,000 IOPS. It suffers with open file handle limits. Azure NetApp Files doesn't have that limitation. Another area is also probably one of the most common recently is Azure VMware Solution. So Azure VMware Solution is a HCI platform, which is essentially boxes with CPU, RAM, and storage. If you need more of any of that, you need more boxes, and these boxes aren't cheap. But the great thing about the introduction of Azure NetApp Files NFS data store support for the AVS solution is, again, you're decoupling the storage from those nodes. So most organizations are more storage heavy than, say, CPU or RAM or memory demands. So being able to flex the storage independently with those data stores means you can deploy less nodes at much less cost and grow the storage as you need it using Azure NetApp Files. And there are others solutions. I think one of the one which is becoming more common, and because of some of these features, as you'll see in a minute, that have been brought to the service, is just unstructured user data. So departmental shares, user home folders, the ability to scale it up, use it, scale it down, present it simply to your hosts, to your end users, is quite compelling. One of the headlines of Azure NetApp Files really is simplicity. It's a very simplistic service to work with, and hopefully at the end during the demo, you'll see how easy that is. So it offers the wildest choice of file protocols. So we support NFS versions 3, 4.1, and indeed SMB. And we do dual protocol volumes. We have customers that have Linux backends writing to file shares that being accessed by Windows front-end client. Also, it has a 99.99% SLA. It's one of the highest SLAs for storage across the Azure platform. It's a highly available service. And again, it's bringing on-premises class performance into the Azure ecosystem. So if you need to migrate workloads as they are, which realistically the majority of people do now, then you can deliver that performance that you had on premises within Azure and then re-architect once you're actually in the platform. It's based on ONTAP. It's the most advanced data management platform there is, with all the goodness of the ability to create snapshots, to create clones, and also replication. And it's an Azure consistent experience. I've already mentioned it's a first-party service from Microsoft, supported, delivered, and built by Microsoft. It has 3 performance tiers: standard, premium, and ultra. At standard tier, you get 60 megabytes per second of throughput per terabyte, right up to 128 megabytes per second of throughput per terabyte at the ultra tier. And I think, but most importantly, this is a managed service. You simply scale it up, you scale it down. You no longer need to be a storage admin to use this service. We're talking with DBAs, with developers, with infrastructure guys who don't want to be managing storage. You simply procure it when you need it, you stand it up, and then you manage, and Microsoft takes care of all the headaches within the background. So how it's actually delivered within Azure. If anybody's, obviously, hopefully you are familiar with Azure and its constructs, so you have an Azure subscription. Within the Azure subscription, this is where you create your Azure NetApp Files accounts. Now, the Azure NetApp Files accounts are where you select the region that you want your data to reside. For instance, in this case, West Europe. Then within your Azure NetApp Files accounts is where you create your capacity pools. And these are important for 2 reasons. It's where you set the performance tier for the storage, but it's also where the billing starts. Currently, the smallest capacity pool size is 4 terabytes, up to 500 terabytes. There is a caveat with this that we do have in public preview 2 terabyte capacity pools. So you can deliver a 2 terabyte capacity pool, but you have to use the standard network features of volumes, and I'll explain that later on. Then within your capacity pools, you create your volumes. Current volume size, the smallest is 100 gig up to 100 terabytes. However, we do also have in public preview 500 terabyte volumes, so you can scale these volumes up to 500 terabytes in size. But ultimately, you can have up to 12.5 petabytes within a single Azure NetApp Files account. Again, slight caveat there that there is a capacity limit by default on a subscription to say you can only have 25 terabytes per account. However, that's a soft limit. It's a simple support case to Microsoft to request that limit to be raised, and that will be actioned quite quickly for you. So the performance and the sizing. So regarding performance, it's a simple equation. It's the service level times the volume quota will give you performance. And in this example here, we have a 10 terabyte volume at the premium performance tier, which is 64 megabytes per second of throughput times 10. That will give you 640 megabytes per second of throughput per terabyte available from that volume. Now, that was based on what we call AutoQoS. So AutoQoS was the original deployment, which essentially, when you created a volume, it automatically assigned the throughput based on its size. As you can see here, the data volume 4 terabytes times 4. At this level is ultra tier, 520 megabytes per second of throughput for that volume. However, in June 2021, Microsoft introduced manual QoS, which brought a huge amount of flexibility because you no longer were reliant on the size of the volume because customers were able to over-provision storage to get the performance. With manual QoS, you can independently assign the throughput to the volume. In this example, the data volume, which is 4 terabytes, should have been 512 based on the AutoQoS. However, as you can see here, it's had randomly 704 megabytes assigned to it. So much more flexibility for the service. And because of this flexibility, we have this method which we call dynamic volume shaping. Now, as you see here on the left-hand side, the green line at the top, that's the provision storage. The blue line underneath is the workload, which is fluctuating throughout the working day. But with dynamic volume shaping, you can actually scale the volume size to meet the workload and its demand. And the natural byproduct of that right sizing is cost optimization. So you can get quite clever with this. Now, this can be done manually or it can be programmatically. We do have a community contribution called the ANF Capacity Manager, which is essentially a logic application which you can implement and run, and it will monitor the capacity and the throughput requirements based on the Azure metrics. So again, this is around helping to maintain that performance, but also keeping one eye on cost. So that was a very brief overview of the ANF service. Now let's have a look at some of the features that have been brought to the service. There's been a lot. So this page is going to scroll for a few seconds, but ultimately, just this year alone, there's been all of these additional features and capabilities that have been brought into Azure NetApp Files. I'd like to highlight a few of them. Now, cross-region replication. This one has been around for a while, but I'm going to start with this one. So cross-region replication. This is another key differentiator over some of the other Azure Files offerings. So for Azure Files, you would have, for performance, you're looking at Azure Files Premium. Azure Files Premium currently only has local and zone redundant storage options. So if you needed, for DR purposes, for business continuity, disaster recovery, replicate data to the partner region, you'd have to implement some sort of copying mechanism. But with Azure NetApp Files, we have cross-region replication. So this is the ability to create an asynchronous copy between the source volume and the target volume. For instance, the volume of source is in UK South, the target is in UK West. And you can set the replication intervals to 10 minutes, 1 hour, or 1 day. What we've also had recently introduced is availability zone volume placement. Now, Azure NetApp Files is a highly available service, 4.9's SLA. It's not a zonal aware service. However, what you now have the option to do with Azure NetApp Files is to place volumes into zones. For instance, here we've got a volume in AZ1 and a volume in AZ2. Excuse me. And then you can allow, for instance, application redundancy to handle the failover. As an example, SAP, HANA System Replication, Oracle Data Guard, or SQL Always On availability groups. Excuse me. And another feature, which is why I started with cross-region replication, was cross-zone replication. And this goes hand in hand with availability zone volume placement. By pinning the volumes to zones, you now have the option to use cross-zone replication, the same as cross-region replication, but this time across zones. You create your source and your target volumes, and you set your replication intervals, again, to be 10 minutes, 1 hour, or 1 day. So the lowest RPO you can get is, say, up to 20 minutes, because there's a 10-minute replication, there's a 10-minute lag, so your lowest RPO could be up to 20 minutes. However, you can introduce things like snapshots and everything else to get, near zero rapid recovery. But regarding the replication and the synchronization, then your RPO is realistically up to 20 minutes. Another feature which has been recently introduced, it's in public preview, is Azure NetApp Files Backup. The great thing about Azure NetApp Files Backup, and I have to point out, it's not part of the Azure Backup Center. It's actually built into the ANF service, and you don't have to license it or pay for the additional backup capability. The great thing about ANF is you simply pay for the storage that you're consuming. So ANF Backup, it's fully managed, integrated into the solution. Essentially what this does, it goes hand in hand with the snapshot policies. It comes along once a day. It hoovers up those snapshots and moves them into ZRS storage. So essentially taking them off of the ANF media and moving into a ZRS storage account. And the great thing about that is you can apply retention policies, so you can have really long-term retention and also reducing the cost of the snapshots that you're storing within the volumes themselves. Another feature which was announced at the end of last year is Azure VMware Solution support for ANF data stores. So Azure VMware Solution, as I mentioned, it's a HCI solution. Okay, it has compute, storage, RAM in the box. By being able to decouple the storage and present it via an NFS mount from Azure NetApp Files, it's massively driving down the cost. And I do have customers that are saving a substantial amount by leveraging ANF data stores over the native inbuilt vSAN capability. And that is utilizing ExpressRoute, ExpressRoute Gateway, and FastPath. The gateway SKUs are recommended to be either the version 3 or the Ultra Gateway, but ultimately, if you combine all that together, it still works out remarkably cheaper than if you had to deploy natively using AVS and vSAN. A few more features, as you saw earlier, there have been a lot. The biggest one last year was standard network features. So standard network features really took Azure NetApp Files forward with many more additional capabilities. The standard network features was actually a limitation within the Azure networking stack, which the Azure networking product team were working on, which has now given the Microsoft ANF team the ability to expose more features. With standard network features, you can utilize network security groups, you can use user-defined routes, and you can peer globally. Before standard network features, you couldn't do any of that. You could only peer one hop, and you couldn't actually peer globally. So that brings a huge amount of capability. SMB shares is now, CA shares is now generally available. So SMB CA shares is continuous availability. And this is really useful for workloads like SQL, FSLogix-driven workloads, or Citrix app layering. Essentially, even though there's a non-disruptive upgrade being carried out on the back-end platform, because, hey, Azure as a platform, it needs to be patched and updated. Those particular workloads could suffer disconnects because of those upgrades happening. The CA share features protects against that, so it prevents against those disconnects happening. Another nice little feature is non-browsable shares. So being able to mask the share being advertised across the network, it could only be accessed via a direct link. So again, a little kind of security feature there. Cloud backups for virtual machines has been brought in as well. So cloud backups for virtual machines for AVS data store. So to be able to, it's a vCenter plugin which you can install to enable a backup of those virtual machines that are being hosted on the ANF data stores for AVS. Double encryption. Quite a big ask for a lot of customers who are very security conscious. So this is encryption at the hardware layer and at the software layer. Support for Azure Virtual WAN has been brought as well. It wasn't previously supported by the V1 team, but now Azure NetApp Files access for across Azure Virtual WAN is supported. The backup vault, so Azure NetApp Files Backup has now had a backup vault introduced. So you can actually create a backup vault to store your backups in, just neatens it up a little bit. Access-based enumeration, again, for unstructured user data, departmental shares. So with access-based enumeration, by default, with permissions, a user accessing a share would see the documents, but not necessarily have access to them. With access-based enumeration, if a user doesn't have permissions on an object, it's not presented them. They don't see that. So a little extra layer of security. One of the biggest ones, which has been released recently, is customer managed keys, the ability to bring your own key. So instead of using the Microsoft managed key for encryption, again, for those who are more security conscious who want to manage their own key, customer managed keys in conjunction with Azure Key Vault is now available for you to apply encryption keys, your own encryption keys to the volume. User and group quotas as well, another one for unstructured user data use cases, the ability to apply a default quota to the volume. For instance, users can only have 50 gig, but then you can create individual quotas that can be more or less to override those default quotas. And also QoS volume moves, so the ability to move volumes that are in a manual QoS pool to an auto QoS pool and vice versa. So there's been many updates over the last year or so, all little enhancements that are just taking the service to the next level. So demo time. I wish I'd leveraged Sam's prayer here, because fingers crossed it should go okay. But if you've got any questions at this point or anything, then please do ask, or feel free to ask as we continue. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop out the PowerPoint for a minute. So what I did for this session is I've created a little lab environment, which is a bit of a takeaway here. I've published it on my GitHub repo. So on the left-hand side, there is a link to this at the end of the presentation, which I'll share with you as well. But ultimately, there's a GitHub repo here with some Terraform code to help you deploy a lab should you want to go and play with Azure NetApp Files. There's a brief guide to what the requirements are, the prerequisites, what it's going to build, a little diagram to show you what it's going to build, and just a basic guide on how to actually go through and deploy the Terraform code. And also, because this is the Welsh user group, I leveraged ChatGPT and I asked it to translate the README into to Welsh. So anybody who can speak the language, please have a look and tell me how good ChatGPT was at doing the translation. But that's a little bit. And over on the right-hand side here, here's some of the code that I've written, which deployed earlier in true Blue Peter fashion. I created this earlier just to make sure. So I pushed the code, and if you can see down here, all this infrastructure was built in just under 30 minutes. So on the left-hand side, these are the resource groups it's created. And the actual lab has created things like it's created ANF accounts, virtual machines, it's created a key vault, network security groups, etc., etc. So all that is in that lab, should you wish to go and play with it. So Azure NetApp Files itself, if I just hop into here. So this is my Azure NetApp Files account, which I've created. Within the Azure NetApp Files account, as I said, this is the regional location, so where you want your data to reside. In this case, it's in North Europe. Microsoft quite handily include a little sort of crib here to show you what the limits are. Some of these are soft limits, as I mentioned earlier. The regional capacity per subscription, 25 terabytes. That's a soft limit. If you need more, a simple support request via the portal to have that limit raised. I think one of the key differentiators of Azure Files is the ability to integrate with Active Directory. With Azure Files, it has a public endpoint. So if you were deploying information that you didn't want to be exposed publicly, you would need to lock those public endpoints down. With Azure NetApp Files, it's actually deployed within your VNet infrastructure using what's called a delegated subnet, which brings the resource managed service into your network infrastructure. And the great thing about that is because it doesn't have a public endpoint, it's quite easy to integrate with AD via this connection string, which is quite simple. It's the usual primary DNS servers, domain name, AD site. You give a prefix, you give the organizational unit. You can enable AES encryption. You can do LDAP over TLS. You can specify, for instance, privileged users for backup, privileged users, privileged security users, or administrators. You can even build out your Kerberos realms and everything else if you need Kerberos authentication. It's that simple. With Azure Files, there's a bit of PowerShell, a bit of jumping through hoops, a bit of faff, and a bit of configuration to do. And what this then does, it uses this configuration string when it creates an SMB volume to essentially hook into NTFS permissions. We have encryption as well, as I mentioned. You've got the option to use either Microsoft managed keys or customer managed keys to bring your own key option. And then we have a capacity pools. I already have a capacity pool created here, but if I wanted another capacity pool, it's quite simple. I just give that capacity pool a name. I choose the service level and the size of the capacity pool I want, and also whether I want it to be auto or manual QoS. I'm just going to leave it at that for default and click on create. But ultimately, within a few seconds, I've now got another 4 terabytes of storage that I can use to present to my hosts. It's very, very simple to work with. Then within the capacity pools, you have your volumes. Again, in true blue Peter fashion, here's one I created earlier. So this is an NFS volume. If I just work through this here, you see there's a whole load of information, for instance, the mount path. But what Microsoft also do is they made it quite easy. They've created mount instructions for those who are not necessarily of a Linux persuasion. There's a few guides, for instance, here, what packages you need to have installed, how to create a directory to mount in, and even the actual mount command itself. You can simply copy that, drop that into your host, and then connect the actual volume to your host. You can set your export policies for NFS. You can set, allow the clients that are allowed to connect. And snapshots, you can create a snapshot in here. So there is already a snapshot in here which is named SnapMirror. And that's because this lab is configured with cross-region replication. So if you look over on the right-hand side here, underneath the volumes, part of the code, this simple few lines of code is essentially what is implementing the replica volume on the other side. So that's all in the lab. So if I wanted a snapshot of volume, you can do this again programmatically if you wish as well via REST API. I can simply add snapshot, give that snapshot a name, click on create, and then within a few seconds, I've got an immutable copy of my data. Snapshots are a great way to protect against ransomware. There's one option you can implement because that is a point in time immutable copy of your data. I have lots of customers using this to good success for various reasons. You can also take that snapshot, should you wish, and restore it to a new volume. Yeah. So if you wanted to do any test or dev, you could snapshot a volume, restore that to a new volume, make that volume on your host, do your testing and development. Once you're finished, throw it away. Simple as that. I can restore files, so I can actually do individual file restores should I wish, or indeed just simply revert that volume to a point in time. With the replication side of it, it's quite straightforward, really. We mentioned it's a replication interval of 10 minutes, 1 hour, or 1 day, and this is cross-region replication. You've already seen we also have cross-zone replication. The backups. So within the actual service itself, you can create backups. Now, if I just hop back up to top layer here, you'll see I have backups, and then within backups you have a backup vault. So you can create a backup vault, configure your backups, assign it to the vault, and then that vault is what looks after and stores all your backups for you. Let's go back to the volume. User and group quotas, as I mentioned as well, you can come in here. For instance, you can add a quota, give the quota a name, quota type, say sort of default user quota, quota limit, for argument's sake, 50 gig. And apply that. And then that is the default quota for all users that are accessing that volume. And that's applied. And the great thing about that as well is interested with the SMB quotas, when you make the volume on the Windows host, it actually says this, it doesn't show you, for instance, the whole 1 terabyte of this volume. It simply shows you have 50 gig. So the end user knows that's all they've got. Quite cool. Within the service itself, you've also got metrics that you can configure. Now, these are Azure metrics. What I need to point out here is these are based on the Azure monitoring system, which spits out metrics every 5 minutes, which is okay, but it's not ideal, especially in the storage world, where 5 minutes is literally a Jurassic period if you're trying to diagnose any faults. But you can still create metrics for all sorts of things, like the throughput, the read, write IOPS, etc., etc. Is it enabled for backup, cooler tier, and everything? So there's quite a bit of options that you can actually apply within the service there itself. Is there any questions? We'll just pause for a second. I've been rattling away for quite a long time. Nope, all good. Okay, let's hop back into the slides. I hope you can see this. So, quick summary, really. ANF, Microsoft First Party Service, it really helps you streamline and aid the migration task, because you can still deliver high performance, low latency storage on demand within Azure, similar to as you did on premises. Efficiency as well, the scalability and the flexibility to service, the ability to scale it up when you need it, scale it down, increase the storage, lower the storage count, can massively introduce cost savings. And it makes it mobile, the ability to actually move the solutions and systems that have been running on premises for years into Azure, but still maintain that consistent experience. within the presentation, which I will share, I will upload it into that GitHub repo to be shared as well. There's some links here. There's the links to the code that I shared. A few links to useful pages on the Microsoft Docs pages, as well as some things like benchmarks for ANF, etc., and some management tools. So get started, have a play. It's a very simplistic service to work with. Create your capacity pools, create your volumes, and map them on your hosts. So thank you. If you'd like to connect with me, please, there's a QR code in the top right-hand corner. Please scan that, reach out, connect to me on LinkedIn. If you need anything further, please give me a shout. But hopefully that has been useful. If you've got any questions, please ask.
Spot on. Thank you, Anthony. No, absolutely brilliant. I mean, you say, were there any questions? I got hundreds of questions running through my head, but I might ask one or two of them now, but I'll probably pick up a lot of them with you offline, because I think it's one of those things when you look at NetApp Files, the kind of the scenarios I come into contact with customers with are normally, they've moved a lot of their file storage over to things like SharePoint, OneDrive, kind of personal folder file and departmental shares. And then they've got this big lump of data that they don't know what to do with. So, when it comes to things like replication, that replication, so zonal and regional replication, is purely, I'm right in thinking that's purely around a DR or a, I don't know, business continuity point of view. Because I know you did say that you could use kind of application aware kind of metrics or capabilities to flick over. Where is Azure NetApp Files in a term of, if I were to relate it to something like DFS in days gone by with replication using, so can we still use those technologies over the top, or does NetApp Files have that user level kind of replication stuff in there still? Where does that fit? It's been a while.
Yeah, so regarding things that you mentioned like DFS namespace, right? You can overlay that on Azure NetApp Files, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we do have several customers doing that. So you can implement that over the top. The replication, I think what I didn't mention was the great thing about the replication is it happens at block level within the service. So it's not file level replication. So if you're thinking about cross-region, I'm not sure, actually. I'm not too sure on the zonal charges, because I think Microsoft have been threatening to implement zonal charges for a while. I think they might have done now.
Yeah, I think it is there now. Yeah, I think you're right.
So if you think about replicating that data across the network and the bandwidth charges you're going to suffer, I mean, with ANF, there is a charge for that replication, but it's quite minimal because it's at block level. It only replicates the change blocks. If you replicate at file level, it's much less efficient, and obviously with all that bandwidth charges as well. So I mean that is a great thing, and the cross zone replication, which is exactly the same. And I've seen customers retracting from using regional protection to using a single region with zonal protection.
Yeah.
So having that ability.
Things, yeah.
But so the application layer. So regarding utilizing the volume pinning to zones or regions, and then having like I said, SQL always on availability groups to manage the replication of the application layer. But with DFS namespace, I do have several customers that are overlaying that on top to manage that as well. I mean, there are, for instance, in VDI, there are other options, for instance, like FSLogic's Cloud Cache, which I'll be honest, not a fan of, but it does work for some scenarios. So that's another option where you can set your preferential order within group policy to what's the primary, secondary, tertiary, etc. And it will, and then Cloud Cache will span the data that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great, Andy. I think that's what I mean. I think when it comes to that kind of traditional view of what do we do with, obviously if it's those kind of NFS type shares, that's one thing. But then when you're down at the file folder level, there seems to be this, where do we put it for the best reason, but for the best course, I guess, because not everything can go into SharePoint, right?
I can't say anything, but there's a massive announcement coming next week, and it's NDA, so I'm not allowed to say anything. But regarding unstructured user data, sort of departmental shares, the simple stuff that you just need online, but you don't want to suffer the cost.
Yeah.
There's a big announcement next week.
Okay, watch it. So I preempted something.
Yeah, watch this space. Look for NetApp Insight. NetApp Insight next week. There's a big announcement for Azure NetApp Files. So,
good news.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. No. Yeah. Anthony, as always, thanks again for joining us. It's been super presentation, and really great to get that deep dive into ANF as well. So thank you once again. If everybody wants to come off mute or show their appreciation with the react button, But equally, stick around because I think it's quiz time now. So thanks once again, Anthony.
Thank you, guys. Pleasure. Thank you.
Let's jump into the quiz then. So yes, our quizmaster unfortunately can't be with us today, so it's on me to get the quiz up and running. So let's do that. So I'm sharing my screen. If you want to either, let's start the quiz up. Again, I think I need the demo gods for this. You can either scan the QR code on your mobile device or visit that URL and type the code in. Let me know once you've done that. You should see you pop up on there. I think we got 8 to 9 people in the chat, so just let me know if you're struggling to connect or anything like that. Somebody's joined without a name. Somebody probably press enter. So whoever that is, you have to remember who you are. Oh no. 2 people without names. I don't know how we're going to do that if one of you wins.
John, tell them to leave and rejoin if the name's not showing.
Does that work, Alan? I can't remember.
I think it will.
If you think you're one of those 2 people, to be honest with you, it'll show on your side if you end up winning. So it'll tell you you're in first place. So we'll just have to say who won. I'm happy to start the quiz. If you're on it, let me know. Or if you're restarting. No, let me just see. There's nothing in the chat, is there? No. Does anybody know who is that one of those people without the name? No, if not, I mean, that's about right. And then we got 8 players. I'm the 9th. Come on, we'll start. We'll see how people get on. Yeah, everybody happy with that? Speak now or forever hold your peace. See, Doug is typing
just
away.
wait a
Come
moment.
on,
Thomas
no
is
problem.
rejoining.
No worries, Thomas. And a couple of minutes. We got 10 questions. I didn't write these quiz questions. Matt thankfully wrote the quiz questions for us this week. He's just, there we go. Something going on there. I think that must be you, Thomas. We'll crack on. I think you'll be able to see if you've won because it'll pop up on your side that it'll show us who's in the leaderboard, and it'll be, just remember who it is. So it's Thomas, and do we know who the other person is? No worries, Doug. Thanks for joining. No worries, Thomas. I think it's just having one of those days. Right, let's crack on. It should work for you. So if I start quiz, hopefully you should see this. But how many employees joined Microsoft from Activision Blizzard this month? 4,000, 5,400, 7,700, or 8,500? I honestly wouldn't know. I did see the announcement. There we go. Split the pack a little bit there. The answer is A. Nobody got that one right. How much does Microsoft allegedly owe in back taxes to the US IRS? Wow. Matt's really gone for it this week. Month, 11 billion, 29 billion, 34 billion, or 68 billion in back taxes. I'm not sure what was going on. Whether that was news or not, I certainly didn't see it. 4 of you got it right. Okay, 29 billion.
It's to do
Wow.
with a certain period, and they're saying that Microsoft declared earnings in other places that should have been declared in the US.
Oh, I see. Fair enough. So they've been. Okie dokie. Right. Next question. Which Microsoft InfoSec initiative is 20 years old this month? Is it Patch Tuesday? Is it Zero Day Friday, Copilot Saturday, or Defender Monday? I expect a full house here, surely. Oh, caught a couple of you out. I can't remember what A was now, but Matt loves his naming conventions. But Patch Tuesday. There we go. Which of the following does Document Intelligence not work with? Interesting. Forms, PDFs, images, or punch cards. Had some good demos earlier from Sam on that, so hopefully those paying attention should know the answer. Yeah, 5, you got that right. Punch cards, absolutely not supported, thankfully. And the next question, what was the, we've already been through this one as well. What was the original name for Azure AI Document Intelligence? Was it Form Recognizer, Document Dump, M365 Office Scanner, or Azure OCR? Again, let's see how many of you are paying attention on that one. Oh, still caught one of you out. Forms Recognizer was the name. Next up, how many free pages a month do you get with Azure AI Document Intelligence? Was it 100, 250, 500, or 1,000? I think Sam showed an area, but I think he showed a different metric. So it'd be interesting to see how many get this. Apparently it's 500. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm the quiz master, but I didn't write the questions. If you've got anything to say, bring it up with Matt next month. Right. What's the maximum throughput for Azure NetApp Files? 2,000, 3,600, 4,500, or 5,600 megabits per second. Anthony, hopefully that answer's correct.
It got me thinking.
But well, you know, we'll have to bring it up with Matt. He's got some really complicated questions here. So
it is correct. You're right.
good.
It is correct, but there's a caveat. There's a preview in a minute which could give you more. But technically, for those that are generally available minded, it's correct.
Good. Okay, we should put that caveat as LGA. Right. Next up, what we got? Which region is Azure NetApp Files not available? West Central US, North Central US, UK West, or West US 3? So which region is it not available? And the answer is why West to Central US? Caught everybody out that one. Okie dokie. And the next question, which of the following is not Azure AI Document Intelligence pre-built model? Is it the invoice? Is it the receipt, the business card, or birthday card? In fairness to Matt, he's like a genius, isn't he, writing these questions? It's almost like he wrote the demos. If you were paying attention, you should remember this. Still caught one of you out. Yeah, correct answer is birthday card. Next up, GitHub Universe 2023 takes place in November in which city? San Francisco, Chicago, Seattle, or New York? Got everybody's answer in. San Francisco it is. Don't know what the date is, but GitHub Universe it is. Be nice to be going. Okay, and there we go. We have a winner. There we go, Anthony. Congratulations. A £25 Amazon voucher will be winging its way over to you. That's not bad for an evening's work, eh?
It's not bad at all. I'm quite surprised actually. Although I will admit I got the ANF region wrong.
That's usually the way, though, isn't it?
That is the way.
Right, let me. I've got your email address. I'll get that one sorted. So yeah, well done, Anthony, and commiserations to those that didn't quite make the mark this month. But there's always next month. So while we're waiting for that, right, let's bring this month session to a close. Bear with, just get the remaining slides. So right, there we go. First off, thank you, huge shout out to our speakers, Sam and Anthony. Really appreciated you giving up your time and joining us this evening to impart your words of wisdom. Great sessions over document intelligence and, of course, Azure NetApp Files. I've certainly learned a thing or two this evening. So thank you once again. But again, thank you to everybody that's turned up tonight. Your presence is really appreciated. Thanks for joining the chat, asking some questions, and joining the quiz at the end. Like I say, you know, this is a community user group, so, you know, really, you know, grateful for the support. Please do keep turning up and helping us spread the word. Next session is due on the 15th of November, usual time. If you can scan the QR code and leave us a little bit of feedback, that would be superb. If not, not a problem. But until next month, we will see you then. Thank you, everybody, for giving up your time. Have a nice rest of the evening. And thanks once again. See you in a few weeks.
Thanks, John.
Cheers all.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much. Bye bye.
Cheers all. Bye.